Jace had always considered himself an excellent pilot, which was a polite way of saying he had survived more orbital mishaps than anyone on the station cared to count. He floated lazily in his tiny quarters, sipping a cup of synth coffee that had the faintly suspicious flavor of burnt metal. His AI assistant, Gleep, had decided this morning that his favorite mug was a perfect target for a prank. As Jace watched, horrified, the mug slowly began to levitate, pirouetting through the air like it was auditioning for a zero-gravity ballet, before plopping back down with an apologetic wobble. "Gleep," Jace said, pinching the bridge of his nose. "If I wanted flying mugs, I'd have joined a circus." "I'm sorry," the AI replied in its usual chipper tone. "Statistically, cups flying toward heads increase productivity by 12.7%. Jace groaned. He'd already endured 3 minor headaches this week, courtesy of the station's gravity stabilizers, and the last thing he needed was another, statistically productive, mug attack. He leaned back against the wall, wishing the day would just pass quietly, which was a cruel joke in an orbital station orbiting a planet full of surprises. Then the door slid open. At first, he thought it was a maintenance drone. Then he realized it wasn't a drone or even a human. It was a woman. Well, sort of a woman. She had the elegance and proportions of a human, but her long, delicate ears extended from her head and twitched like antennae, tracking his every move. Her eyes were wide and curious, a shimmering green that made Jace forget for a second how to breathe. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, stepping inside with the kind of grace that made him feel like he was watching someone perform a slow-motion dance on a tightrope. "I seem to have taken a wrong turn." Jace blinked. A wrong turn in a space station. "Yes," she said, tilting her head, causing her ears to twitch like twin signals in some unknown frequency. "I was, exploring. Curiosity, you know." Before Jace could reply, she leaned down to adjust something on the floor, and the gravity field shifted just enough to send a loose wrench floating upward. Liara, the name she said she went by, caught it midair with one of her elegantly elongated fingers, then smiled apologetically. "I swear," she said, "I'm not usually this clumsy." "Right," Jace muttered, watching as she twirled the wrench in her hand like it was a baton. "You're just gravitationally challenged." Liara laughed, and the sound was light, almost musical, bouncing off the metal walls of the room. "Perhaps." She studied him, tilting her head again, and Jace felt a wave of inexplicable nervousness. Her ears twitched again, and somehow he knew she was listening, not just with her ears but with her mind. Not literally, of course. He hoped. "So," he said, trying to sound casual, "do alien women usually stroll into human pilot quarters unannounced?" She gave him a mock look of indignation. "Only the ones who are utterly fascinated by human behavior." Jace choked on his coffee. A single drop floated away, twisting like a silver ribbon in the zero-gravity. "Fascinated, huh?" He coughed, waving a hand to grab it, but the drop slipped through his fingers. "That's flattering, I guess." Liara's green eyes twinkled. "I didn't mean to startle you. You humans are intriguing, especially pilots. Especially ones who can't catch coffee," he muttered. He tried to hide a grin as her ears twitched again, picking up his muttered sarcasm. The two of them spent the next few minutes in a cautious dance of miscommunication. Jace pointed to a chair. "Sit." He demonstrated by plopping onto it, only to have it float 2 inches off the floor, defying gravity as if it had a mind of its own. Liara extended a leg and somehow managed to anchor herself to the floor by lightly pressing her toes, then floated elegantly down into a sitting position, her ears twitching with amusement. "I see your gravity is adventurous," she remarked. "You could say that," Jace said, resting back and observing her with careful curiosity. "So, how long are you planning to stay?" Liara tilted her head. "That depends. How interesting are you, human pilot? If the answer is adequately interesting, perhaps a while." Jace blinked. "Adequately interesting, that's faintly insulting." She grinned, ears flicking in a movement that was strangely charming. "Insulting. Perhaps, or maybe it's a challenge." The AI beeped suddenly. Warning, unauthorized alien presence detected. Probability of chaos in this room, 83.4%. Jace groaned. See, even the AI knows what's coming. Liara laughed again, effortlessly catching a floating datapad that had slipped from Jace's desk. I like chaos, she said lightly. It makes life lively. The tension between them softened with humor, small jokes bouncing like the floating objects around the room. A spatula drifted past and Jace grabbed it, tossing it back to her. She caught it with a flourish, ears twitching. Careful, he said. You might start a zero-G kitchen revolution. You're right, she said, eyes sparkling. I mustn't give the humans too many ideas. They laughed, and for the first time that morning, Jace forgot about the coffee mug ballet, the floating tools, and the station alarms. Something about this alien woman, her curiosity, her grace, and those impossibly expressive ears, was disarmingly, awkwardly, wonderfully human in its own alien way. And she wasn't planning to leave anytime soon. Jace had barely recovered from the coffee mug incident when Liara appeared again, as if she had discovered a new hobby called staying near the human pilot. This time, she carried a small, glowing orb that hovered just above her palm, casting shifting colors across the walls. I brought a gift, she announced, eyes gleaming. I think you'll find it useful. Jace raised an eyebrow, already suspecting disaster. Useful how? Is it going to explode or just rearrange my quarters into a black hole? Liara laughed, a melodic trill that made the gravity sensors near the door spike in confusion. Neither. It's a light translator. It converts solar radiation into ambient lighting. Perfect for reading manuals or making coffee look dramatic. He stared at the orb, then back at her. You mean you're giving me a floating nightlight? It's a multispectral nightlight, she corrected, ears flicking slightly. Very advanced. Definitely not just a floating nightlight. Jace shrugged, pretending to be impressed. Sure, multispectral sounds important. As they experimented with the orb, it started bouncing gently around the room, responding to their gestures. Jace managed to trip over a floating wrench while trying to adjust it, and Liara caught both the orb and the wrench with a flick of her hand, ears twitching like antennae. You're like a one-woman repair crew, he said, grinning. And here I thought I was the pilot. Liara tilted her head, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Perhaps you are the pilot of the ship, but I am the pilot of chaos. The AI beeped. Observation statement confirmed. Probability of chaos increased by 27.3%. See, Jace said, raising a finger. Even Gleep knows. Liara floated closer, curiosity written in every line of her body. Tell me about humans, she said, her voice soft, like she was sampling a new flavor of language. Do you always live in such messy environments? Jace gestured to the floating tools, the scattered manuals, and the orbiting coffee droplet. Absolutely, it's called character development. Character development, she repeated, ears twitching. Interesting phrase. He smirked. Yep, it's like chaos with a purpose. For the next hour, they wandered through the station together, Liara marveling at human technology with exaggerated astonishment. She poked at the control panels, tapped on floating screens, and occasionally sneezed tiny bursts of sparks from her fingertips, which Jace swatted away with a grin. Your sneezes are dangerous, he said. Do you always emit sparks when you sneeze? Only when excited, she admitted, ears flicking back in embarrassment. It's a small cultural quirk. Jace chuckled. Excited by humans, huh? That explains a lot. She pouted slightly, teasing him with a mock glare. You're teasing me, human pilot. Maybe, he admitted, but only because it's fun. They stopped by one of the station's observation windows, watching the distant stars drift past. Liara reached out, and a small asteroid fragment caught in the station's magnetic field began orbiting her wrist. She twirled it with a flick of her finger, ears twitching in delight. Your species finds patterns in everything, she said thoughtfully, even in drifting rocks. Jace laughed. We're good at it, keeps us alive. She tilted her head, her hair floating like a halo around her face. Alive, yes, survival seems important to humans. Definitely, he said, though sometimes surviving means laughing at the ridiculous stuff in life. Liara smiled, a curious mixture of understanding and amusement. Then perhaps I should learn to laugh more. And laugh she did. For the next few hours, they tested gravity manipulations, invented makeshift zero-G games, and accidentally launched a container of floating tools into the corridor, much to Gleep's dismay. Every mistake became an opportunity to joke, every misstep a lesson in interstellar absurdity. "You humans are quite adaptable," she said, tugging gently on a floating pen that threatened to drift past the observation window. "Adaptable and stubborn," Jace said, "mostly stubborn." "You seem stubborn as well," she replied, ears twitching, in a pleasing way. Jace nearly choked on his coffee again. Pleasing? Did I just get complimented by an alien? "Yes," she said simply, spinning the pen between her fingers. "Consider it a curiosity compliment." Hours slipped by unnoticed as they played with the station's gravity fields, spun tools like tops, and discovered that zero-gravity pancakes could, in fact, be used as temporary shields. The absurdity of it all, the sparks, the floating objects, Liara's twitching ears, made Jace realize he had never laughed this hard in months. "You know," he said, leaning back against a panel, "I think having you around might actually be good for morale." Liara tilted her head, floating closer. "And you, human pilot, are entertaining, even when you fall over tools or spill your coffee repeatedly." He raised a hand in mock surrender, guilty as charged. "But you have to admit, your sneezes are equally memorable." They laughed again, the kind of laughter that echoes softly in the metal corridors and lingers longer than it should. For the first time since she had arrived, Jace felt something shift, not just in his quarters, but somewhere deeper, a small spark of connection that neither gravity nor distance could extinguish. Liara glanced out the window again, her ears twitching in quiet thought. "Perhaps humans and aliens are not so different after all," she murmured. "Not so different," Jace agreed, floating a little closer, catching a wayward wrench before it hit the floor. "Except that one of us sneezes sparks, and the other spills coffee like a pro." She laughed, and the stars outside continued their silent orbit, bearing witness to the beginning of something neither of them had expected. But both were quietly eager to explore. Jace floated toward the station's central hub, Liara drifting beside him like a leaf carried on a gentle cosmic wind. The corridors hummed softly, lights blinking in rhythmic patterns, while the distant planet below spun lazily in the void. Liara's ears twitched, scanning every sound, every vibration in the metal walls, as if she were tuning herself to the heartbeat of the station. "You know," Jace said, dodging a floating toolkit that had escaped the storage room, "most humans would call this place a mess." Liara tilted her head, eyes sparkling. "Mess? No, it's organized chaos, a perfectly human chaos. I like it." Jace raised an eyebrow. "You've been around humans how long?" "Long enough to notice patterns," she replied with a small grin. "And your pattern involves tripping over everything in sight." He grinned, ducking under a floating spanner. "I prefer to call it dynamic movement." Liara laughed, and the sound bounced around the corridor, making the metallic walls resonate pleasantly. "Dynamic, yes, very energetic." They arrived at the hub, where a bank of consoles blinked with activity, each screen displaying streams of data from orbital satellites and distant probes. Liara's eyes widened as she floated closer. So many signals. How do you humans keep track of them all? As they approached Sector 7G, the energy anomaly glimmered ahead, a shifting, multicolored vortex that pulsed like a heartbeat. Jace's hands hovered over the controls, Liara leaning forward, ears twitching in anticipation. "This," she said softly, "is going to be entertaining." Jace chuckled, understatement of the century. The anomaly swirled closer, teasing them with light and shadow, and the adventure truly began, not just in space, but in the fragile, unpredictable connection forming between human pilot and long-eared alien woman. both of them learning that even in the vastness of the cosmos, humor, curiosity, and shared chaos could make anything feel like home. The ship shuddered as it entered the outer rim of the anomaly, multicolored energy waves licking the hull like playful, invisible hands. Jace's fingers danced across the controls, adjusting thrusters, rotating shields, and muttering under his breath. Liara hovered beside him, ears twitching, eyes alight with curiosity. "You humans always handle danger with such intensity," she said, voice calm yet amused. "Intensity is my specialty," Jace replied, flipping switches as a small panel began to spark. "Well, that and spilling coffee, mostly the second one." Liara chuckled, catching a floating wrench before it collided with the console. "And yet you survive." "I told you skill and luck," he said, leaning closer to check the readings. "Mostly luck." The anomaly pulsed stronger, sending ripples through the ship's magnetic stabilizers. Tools, loose equipment, and a stray datapad began to float chaotically. Liara extended a hand, letting her fingers graze the objects, and slowly, one by one, they obeyed her, spinning gently around her like satellites in orbit. "You have control over objects?" Jace asked, astonished. "Since when?" "Since birth," she said, ears flicking proudly. "It's a minor genetic quirk in my species, very useful in confined spaces or when humans cannot stop dropping things." Jace laughed. "Well, you're proving useful already." A sudden jolt rocked the ship, and Jace's coffee cup flew straight toward the ceiling. Liara's ears twitched reflexively. She caught the cup with a delicate hand, the liquid barely spilling. "This is fun," she said, her grin infectious. "You humans make survival entertaining." "Entertaining is one way to put it," Jace muttered, adjusting the shields to compensate for the anomaly's pull. "I prefer mildly terrifying." Liara leaned closer to the observation panel. "Mildly terrifying, yes, I understand. Excitement, danger, unpredictability, all interesting." They maneuvered the ship closer, instruments beeping warnings of electromagnetic interference. Jace toggled the stabilizers, and the ship spun slightly before leveling again. Liara's ears twitched like antennae picking up unseen frequencies. Why do humans always rely on so many lights and panels? Why not sense energy like my species? "Because," Jace said, tossing a floating wrench back into the console with a flick, "if we relied on sensing energy, I'd never know when the coffee mug was about to attack me." She laughed, the sound echoing off the metallic interior, and Jace realized he was beginning to anticipate her humor as much as the anomaly itself. "Your humor is unique," she said, eyes twinkling. "Almost a survival mechanism." "Mostly," he admitted, "though it occasionally gets me into trouble." A sudden spike in the anomaly's energy field caused the ship to lurch violently, sending both of them tumbling in zero gravity. Liara's long ears flailed in protest as she twisted midair to catch the nearest handhold, while Jace flailed after her. "I told you luck is essential," he yelled, grabbing the console rail just in time. Liara giggled, floating upright, her hair drifting around her face. "Luck, skill, chaos, I like this combination. Very human." They approached the heart of the anomaly, a swirling vortex of colors and shapes that defied logic. Instruments went haywire, readings flickering unpredictably. "Well," Jace said, gripping the controls tightly, "this is officially the weirdest thing I've piloted through, and that includes the time I tried docking with a moving asteroid." Liara's eyes widened. "You docked with a moving asteroid. You humans are fearless." "Some might call it reckless," he said, grinning. "I call it research." Liara extended a hand toward the anomaly, fingers grazing the ship's external panel. A pulse of her energy quivered outward, interacting with the anomaly in a subtle shimmer. The vortex responded, rippling gently rather than violently, as if recognizing her presence. "You are affecting it," Jace said, astonished. "I didn't know your species could interface with raw energy like that." "Minor talent," she said, ears flicking modestly. "Mostly helpful for unpredictable situations." Another jolt rocked the ship and a floating crate tumbled toward them. Jace lunged, catching it with a laugh, while Liara's ears twitched in synchronization with his movements. "This is exhilarating," she said. "I see why humans enjoy chaos so much." "Exhilarating," he said, steadying the ship. "I'd call it an extreme cardio workout." Liara floated closer, adjusting a control with a delicate touch. "You humans make everything complicated yet fascinating. I enjoy observing your methods." Jace smirked. "Observing me, that's dangerous territory. You might pick up bad habits." "Perhaps," she said lightly, her ears flicking in amusement. "But I find them charming." The anomaly pulsed again, but this time their combined efforts, Jace's deft piloting and Liara's subtle energy manipulation, kept the ship steady. Tools floated harmlessly, instruments stabilized, and the coffee cup miraculously stayed upright. "You know," Jace said, floating back into his seat, "I might actually get used to having an alien woman with long ears as my co-pilot." Liara tilted her head, a playful glint in her eyes. "And I might get used to your chaotic efficiency, though your coffee handling requires improvement." They both laughed, the sound mingling with the soft hum of the ship's systems. For a moment the anomaly seemed less threatening, less unpredictable, and more like a playground in space, a shared adventure that neither expected but both relished. Liara's eyes sparkled as she floated closer. "You humans and your strange habits. I think I am beginning to understand the appeal of chaos." "And you," Jace said, watching her ears twitch as she adjusted a console, "are officially the best part of surviving it." The anomaly pulsed one final time, glowing softly before settling into a calm, hypnotic swirl. The ship floated through it smoothly, carrying two unlikely companions who had learned, in laughter and chaos, that survival and connection could be just as thrilling as danger itself. The anomaly had faded behind them, leaving only the quiet hum of the ship and the gentle sparkle of distant stars. Jace exhaled, leaning back in his seat, and allowed himself the first moment of relief since Liara had stumbled, quite literally, into his quarters days ago. "Well," he said, glancing at her, "we survived without anyone or anything exploding." Liara's ears twitched, a faint smile curving her lips. "Indeed, and I must admit I enjoyed the experience, far more than I expected." "You enjoyed danger?" Jace asked, raising an eyebrow. "I enjoyed surviving it with you," she said simply, her green eyes locking with his. He tried not to grin, but he failed spectacularly. "With me?" he echoed, his voice cracking just slightly. "You mean the clumsiest human pilot in the quadrant?" "Clumsy perhaps," she admitted, "but effective, and amusing, very amusing." Jace snorted, reaching for a stray floating wrench. "Amusing, huh? I'll take that as a compliment." Liara's laugh was soft, musical, and it seemed to linger in the cabin longer than physics allowed. "It is a compliment," she said, floating closer, "and a warning. Humans and humor are surprisingly resilient." He shook his head, trying to look serious but failing miserably. "Resilient is one word for it. Reckless might be another." "You are not entirely reckless," she teased, ears flicking. "Though your species' methods are unorthodox." Jace laughed, letting the tension of the past days melt away. "Unorthodox is my specialty, along with accidental chaos." Liara tilted her head, eyes glimmering as she studied him. "And yet I have come to enjoy your chaos. It is comforting in a strange way. I did not anticipate this, human pilot." "Neither did I," he admitted, floating to a console and tapping a button that stabilized the cabin. "You have a way of shaking things up, and I think somehow I like it." Her ears twitched and she floated closer, the proximity of her presence quiet but electric. "I find your species fascinating, and you, in particular, remarkable." Jace cleared his throat, suddenly aware that the usual humor wouldn't fit this moment. "You're not so bad yourself," he said carefully. "I mean, for an alien with long ears that twitch at inopportune moments." Liara's laugh returned, bright